Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Learning Data Live 2020. I'm Alan Pringle of Scriptorium Publishing, and I will be moderating the first 2 sessions of today. Learning Data Live is brought to you by Scriptorium, the content strategy experts. Since 1997, Scriptorium has helped companies manage, structure, organize, and distribute content in an efficient way. If you're trying to figure out how the data model can best support your content, or you're setting up a data system, please contact us. We would love to work with you. LearningData.com and Learning Data Live would not be possible without the help from our sponsors. We thank them very much for their support. Just want to let you know, during the webcast, you will be muted as an attendee, but we still want your questions and feedback. So if you would, look for the chat module in the GoToWebinar interface. You can type your questions and comments into it. And there will be a question and answer session at the end of each of these sessions, and we will drop in some links during that part of the session. And one of those links will be for a survey to get your feedback on how this event is going. Our next presentation is going to be by Kaitlyn Heath, my colleague at Scriptorium, on the Learning and Training Specialization. Are you there, Kaitlyn?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so let me hand over presenting to you, and then you can do your presentation.
All right. Okay. And can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to Learning and Training Explained. I'm Kaitlyn Heath. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit sick. I apologize, but I think that we can all make it through the next 45 minutes. I'm a technical specialist with Scriptorium since 2018. I do content strategy implementation, so I help determine what's necessary for clients' content to make it successful, and then I help create and test any technical solutions that they need to make that possible. And I also helped write the learning and training course on learningdata.com. There's a lot of great information in here, and I encourage you guys to go look at that after this session for more information and examples and hands-on experience with that. And I think since this is the learning and training session, I can show you my favorite learning institution, Virginia Tech, which is where I went to school. And I learned all about data from Dr. Carlos Evia in my technical writing major. And there's just one more picture. Okay, back to the learning and training specialization. Often I will abbreviate this as L&T. And we have the obligatory classroom theme here for this presentation. So the learning and training specialization is really designed to match patterns in instructional content so that you can, with data, create and reuse content more efficiently. So why do you want to use this? What's it useful for? So when considering whether to use it, you might want to think about the things that data helps with as well. So does your learning content have lots of reuse? Are you going to be reusing information between outputs? Do you have existing data content that maybe you want to convert into learning content or reuse parts of it in your learning content? And do you have many outputs? Do you need to create a textbook and an e-learning course? So those are the things that you might want to think about when considering this. And I just want to take this time to talk about, what learning content might look like, because I think it's really different for a lot of different people. So, you can think about traditional classroom content as, presentations and, students have a textbook and then you're creating assessments and answer keys and things like that. But learning content might also be, training for employees in a power plant or training for customers for a software product. So it can take a lot of different forms. So the learning and training specialization, it might look a lot different depending on how you want to use it. You can, really modify it based on your needs. So how does the specialization do this? It's made up of learning topic types, map types, and those map types have map domains, which contain special elements. And then there's the interactions domain, which is used mostly for assessments and questions for students. And then there's the metadata domain, which is really based on learning object metadata. And many of these topic types and map elements, they mirror standard data elements. There are some with new functionality, mainly questions, and we'll talk about those. But for the most part, you'll be able to see the commonalities in standard data elements inside of the learning and training specialization topics and elements. Okay. So this is a list of the learning and training topic types. First, you've got your learning plan, and then your learning overview, learning content, learning summary, and learning assessment. And we're going to go over in more detail what each of these means, but those are the 5 topic types. So I want to show you this image from the OASIS Data Committee, and you will find this if you go into the DITA 1.3 specifications. If you look that up and do a search for the learning and training specialization, you'll find this there. And I think this does a really good job of outlining what the topic types look like. So you can see over on the right, you've got your learning plan, which is mainly designed for instructors to create a learning plan. It's not necessarily meant for student eyes. And then you've got your learning overview, which might give a quick summary of what you're about to learn. And then the learning content, which will have the bulk of your learning materials in it, and then maybe a learning summary with more bullet points that say, this is what you just learned, and then a learning assessment. And you can see here that on the left, this image shows that information objects are meant to be reused within the learning content. So maybe you're reusing your standard data within this specialization among other learning and training topic types. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the learning plan. I think it's safe to say that the learning plan has probably the most elements that are brand new or have new functionality in the learning and training specialization. There are so many of them, and I encourage you to look at what's there if you need to use it, because you can probably find anything that you need already specialized. But these are just a few of the elements that are used for pre-course planning. So you can see that there's LC, modified date, delivery date, any needs analysis that your students might have. You can put there, you can, there's gap analysis. Then there's intervention. So what might you be doing to address the gap analysis? And then, any assessments or how you plan on delivering this information. All of those elements are available for instructor planning. And I think a lot of people sometimes think, okay, what is my learning plan? So maybe you don't use a learning plan. You don't necessarily need to use all of these elements or even all of these topic types. And I just want to point that out. So if you find yourself saying, I don't do this, I don't need that, that's okay. You don't need to. If it doesn't work for you, then don't use it. So then we're going to move over to the learning overview. And I know there's some code here and it looks a little dense, but I want to show you what the elements look like in the context of these topic types. So learning overview, as I said, is usually, objectives or prerequisites that you might want your students to know what they're about to learn. And you can see here that we have a learning overview body, which is the main element, or the main containing element in the learning overview topic type. And that really matches any of the standard data topics where you'll have a concept with a concept body or a task with a task body. So it's designed in the same way. And then you can see, I mean, here I've left these empty, but you can include things like audience, the time it would take for students to complete this lesson or this course. And then you see your objectives element where you can list any objectives that you want your students to know about here. And there are other elements included, but this is just an example of what it might look like. And you know, some people again ask, why can't I just make this in a concept topic and then include a list? Well, you could do that, but the learning and training really gives you some more semantic value for your learning content. Okay, so let's move on to learning content topic type. And so this is the main body of your learning content. Here we've got some more code. I'm sorry, I know. So you can see the containing learning content topic type, and then you've got your title, and then again, a learning content body element that will contain most of your learning information. And then there are a series of elements that you can use within this. But what I really want to point out here, as much as you can include everything inside of this instruction element, you then can embed tasks or concepts or other data topics within the learning content topic type. So you can see here, I mean, obviously it's very short and bare bones, but we have a task type outside of the learning content body with its own, you know, ID and then title and then steps included in that. And so if you feel the need to write tasks within your learning content, you have the capability of doing that, and then maybe, you know, referencing or reusing that task later in another topic. Okay, so then I'm going to move on to the learning summary topic type. So this is generally going to be a review of the content for students, or maybe instructions on what they're going to do next. You can see I've gotten very creative here. You see the learning body summary, right? And then you have your unordered list that might just say, this is what we just learned. And then I'm going to move on to the learning assessment. And so in the image that we saw earlier, you saw assessment listed at the end, but really it can be a pre or post assessment. Maybe you want to find out what your students already know, and then in that case, you would include a pre-assessment. And this will contain questions, which in the learning and training specialization, they're called interactions. Then you'll do any exercises, quizzes, tests, exams. And it's structured, again, you have your main body element, and then within that body, you'll have interactions. And I want to point out here, you might choose to organize a long list of interactions within one learning assessment topic, or you might choose to keep your questions separate. You might then later reference all of those assessment topics in a map so that they can be reorganized and reused that way. And that's helpful for things like online learning when maybe you're not delivering them in the same order every time. So let's look at a couple of the interaction types that we have. So you can see here that there's true, false, single select, multiple select. You have options to create matching questions. You can create sequenced questions. So, you might say, what is the correct order of the following, items? And then you can also create open questions. And then the hotspot is really interesting. You can use images and coordinates to create questions where students can identify the correct position on an image, if that's something that you feel is necessary for your students to know how to do. And you'll notice that there's a 2 after all of these. That's because there is a new interaction domain, or a newer interaction domain with the learning and training specialization interaction types. And so in the old one, it was just the LC true false without the 2, and those did not allow for block elements. So if you wanted to have multiple paragraphs of content in a question, you weren't able to do that. But with learning, the learning content true false 2, you're able to have more than one paragraph. And so most of these are have semantic value as well, so it's easy to tell which ones you're using. Let's look at an example of a single select interaction. We're not going to go through all of the question types, but again, I encourage you to go to the learning and training course on learningdata.com, because there's some more thorough explanation and examples in there. So you can see this LC interaction would be inside of our learning assessment body. And then we've got the element LC single select 2, which is then containing our question. And so the question element is going to contain our actual question content. So here, select the correct option. Again, I'm very creative. We have option 1 and option 2. So first we have our answer option group, and then within that, our first answer option, which you'll notice has more than just one element inside of it. So first, you're seeing the thing that students are going to see as their answer option, option 1, that's our answer content. But then aside from that, you can see that we have LC feedback. And so you can include feedback that students will see based on the answers that they select. So especially useful, again, for learning content, for e-learning content, where you might not have an instructor right there, but based on the answer that they select, you can give them specific feedback on why that's wrong. And you can also do that with the correct answer as well. I just have not included that here. You can give feedback, great job, it's right because of this. And then so you can see here with option 2, we have the correct response tag, which indicates that that's the correct answer. And what's really cool about this is that you don't have to create an answer key and a test document separately and maintain them separately. You can author that content side by side, and you don't have to break it apart. But your students still won't see it. So you don't run that same risk of them, getting the answer key on accident. Okay, like I said, this is the only example of an interaction that I'm going to go over, but many of them are structured similarly, with variations based on the needs of that question type. Okay, so let's move on to learning and training map types. So there are 2 map types. There's a learning object map and a learning group map. And really you can use these as you need to, but they're designed in sort of a hierarchy. So the learning object we're going to think about for the purposes of this presentation as maybe a chapter, and the learning group map as, the book. So let's think of learning group maps as the larger containing maps of object maps. Great. So let's look at a little more detail in the learning group map. And I just want to point out here in this example that it really is similar to our standard map type. You're going to have, if you were to have maybe a containing topic ref, or even if you were to use a book map, it would look really similar. So we have our map element, this learning group map, and then within that is our learning group, which is really designed, that extra element is meant to be able to be reused. So that's why we have another separate element there. And then within that, you'll see that there is a distinct element for each type of topic that we have in the learning and training specialization. So we can have our learning objectives, we can have our learning assessment, we can have our learning summary, and then here we have learning object ref. And I'm just going to move on to our learning object map. Okay, and so we're going to think about this as the chapter. Let's look at an example of this because I have more detail here about what this is going to look like. So again, we have our learning object map, and then within that we have our learning object, which is meant to be reused. And so you can see here we've got learning plan, learning overview, and then many or however many you need learning contents, and then learning summary. And then here is a learning post-assessment ref, which this would be a different element if it was a pre-assessment. It would be learning pre-assessment ref. And you would place it up at the top. And then you can see that for each of these, I have my distinct topic, my DITA learning and training specialization topics. I would have my overview, and then maybe my lessons, and then my specific summary topic, and then my assessment topic. So that's what it's going to look like. So let's talk about map elements. So those elements are viable in both learning group maps and learning object maps, and they contain the same elements except for the fact that learning objects cannot contain learning groups. So like I said, that's designed to be sort of larger in the hierarchy of the maps. But for the most part, you can use these however you want. So learning groups can contain learning objects. And then as you can see here, learning objects can contain other learning objects. Really, and you can keep doing this indefinitely. And maybe you don't even want to use learning groups. Maybe you're only using learning objects. You can design this however you need to make it work for you. But learning objects do not contain learning groups there in the red. Okay, and so you can do this a couple of different ways. So here I've got a learning group map with an embedded object map. So you'll notice there's that reusable element, that learning object right in the middle there. We don't have to create a separate learning object map to create a learning object. That element is viable within this map. And so you can see, maybe if I was creating, again, we're going to call this learning group the book or the course, the largest information. Or so this lesson for this group, then we'll have an overview. And then within lesson 1, we've got topics. So our learning object is representing our topics here. And then maybe we have an overview for the topic, the content of the topic, a short assessment, testing students on what was in that topic. And then, you would have multiple of these. Then we do topic 2 and topic 3 in another learning object. And then you'll have your learning summary for the lesson, and that would end your lesson. So that's kind of how it's designed to work. Again, you can do this in many different ways based on your needs. And then you can do it this way. So again, this is basically the same thing that we just looked at, but in this case, instead of writing the learning object within the map, I've got a learning object map ref, which you can do also. And that just might depend on whether you're reusing it. Are you going to reuse that topic over and over again, or is it really only going to be contained in this lesson? So, you can do this the same way that you would use any other data map, where you can create a list of topic refs that are nested within each other, or you can create another map that's referenced within that map. Okay. And then again, I want to point out that this is really flexible. So we've got these learning topic types and we have these learning maps, but it's possible to reference these data topics that you're creating in the learning and training specialization within normal data maps and content. So you can see here I've got a map, and then these might be all of the same data topics that I used previously, but I have them in topic refs, right? And that is totally valid. You're able to do that. It's just going to depend on how you have set up your output, how you want it to look based on, do you want to publish it from a standard map or from a learning and training map? But it's totally fine to do either way. For our learningandData.com course, we use standard maps with our learning content topic types referenced within them. So we do it, and it looks closer to this. And then in the same way, you can reference normal data topics as your learning overview or your learning content. So if you have a concept that works really well in your, let's say you have a technical manual and you're creating a course for your workers on that technical manual, and you've got a chapter in there about how to start the machine, right? Or what does the machine do? Those can be reused from your standard content, and you can reference them in any position on this learning object map. So we can take that how to start the machine topic and just use that as our first learning content topic in this map. And then you can then create other, maybe a learning summary or a learning overview topic type if that works best for you. It's however you want to make it work, but there is not going to be an error that you haven't used the right data topic type in this map. Okay, so I'm finishing up a little bit early here. So I don't want you to be overwhelmed with all of this information because there's a lot of it, and there's a lot more that I didn't go over. I don't want you to get sucked into the spec. I want you to be able to make it work for you. So like I said, if it's really flexible, and if there's any, there's a lot of use cases for the specialization. And if you can think of any of those that we haven't mentioned, I would love to hear from you. But basically, hello, Alan, are you there?
I am here, and I just took over
great.
to show the
Great.
question
Okay.
slide. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, so please send us your questions. We already have one. Can you create interactive online material where students select answers from a multiple choice list and are graded?
Yes, yes, you can do that. It's possible. So, the way that we go about doing that usually is creating SCORM output that can be ingested by a learning management system. And then, you'll use your learning assessment topic to create questions that will then be converted into SCORM, ingested by the learning management system that way.
Yeah, and for those of you who have taken any of the courses on learningdata.com, those assessment questions, those are based on data source. The source content for those questions and those assessments are in data. And we basically created a transform where our WordPress-based LMS can ingest them. So it takes those converted questions and we pull them into WordPress, and there you go. You have these little quizzes, and you are graded as you go through the test.
Absolutely. And like I said, there's feedback along with our questions as well for many of them that says, nope, it's not this because of this. You get feedback as you go along, and then we're able to author that right in the learning assessment, topic type alongside the questions. It's really cool.
Here's another question. What is an example of why you would use a learning map within a concept?
A learning map within a concept?
Yes.
I don't believe
You
that
may use it. I wonder if the person means a
learning map,
concept within a learning map. Maybe that's what they mean.
a concept within a learning map. So I'm I'm gonna think that you're meaning, a learning concept, learning content. Oh, okay. So a standard did a concept within a map.
I
Well, so
guess.
okay. So I think the the reason that I can think of that you would do that, and that I've seen people do it, you have a concept that you've already created for some other data content that you already have, and you're reusing it in a course that you're creating about that content, right? So you don't want to have to rewrite that information. It's already written for you. Then you would just be able to reference it within that map. Does that make sense? I'm hoping.
And the person is clarifying, what I may do is have you contact her offline via email. So
Sure.
we will contact you to clarify this question to be sure we're answering it correctly, because I think there's something lost. We got a little disconnect here. Some other questions. Can I include a topic on multiple topic maps?
Can you include a topic on
Multiple
multiple
top.
topic maps? I'm sorry, I don't understand this question either.
I don't. Let me see what else we've got here. Because maps, and again, we can look at these questions and get clarification from you via email.
Absolutely, yeah.
Speaking of email, if you do have questions that may be too hard to put into the chat module, please send them to us at experts@learningdata.com. We will answer them. Also, take a look in the chat module. We will drop in a link to a survey to get your feedback on how this event is going. Let's see. Because map and book maps are available directly, where can we use this for learning maps?
Where can you use learning? I mean, are they asking if it's available for them to use? I mean, it's part of the DITA specification, the DITA 1.3 spec. So it's open source. You're able to use it just the same as you would use anything else. Is that what the question is?
No, I think they're asking about maps and book maps versus learning maps. Where can we
Oh,
use them with each other?
I'm actually not sure if you can include book maps, but I mean, you can still reference learning content within book maps as well. You can use it the same way if that works for you. So maybe if you're writing like a textbook, and then instead of using, the learning maps, you would prefer to use a book map, and that makes more sense for you, you could still include those learning topic types within that book map.
Okay. Yeah, and these questions are very technical, and I just want to make it clear, the learning and training specialization is enormous. There are so
It's
many
huge.
elements. It is huge. It is overwhelming. And I think I really need to drive home the point. You are under no obligation to use all the elements in it. So
Absolutely.
some of these questions are extremely detailed on very specific use cases, and it is a bit difficult to answer them without a lot of context. And we'll be glad to follow up with you.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's best is going to depend on what your specific situation is.
Exactly. These questions we welcome them, but they are very specific, and we can get to you more detail when we read them and get more details offline. Let's see what else we have here. The opportunity to reuse documentation, content, and learning modules is compelling. Are you aware of successful implementations of this type of reuse?
We are working with, some clients that use it, and, it's working for them. They don't have to rewrite their content every time they want to create a new course. So yes, it does work.
Good.
It's really exciting. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? And again, the very specific questions about maps and the elements and how they interact, we will address those offline. And I apologize, it is very difficult to do that on the spot, and we'll be glad to answer those in more detail later. Do we have any other questions? Okay, Kaitlyn, thank you very much.
Thank you.